Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's your friend Bats. My name is Jared. That's Carl. And this is The Amazing Spider-Man One More Day by J. Michael Straczynski and Joe Quesada. This is the book, right? This is the most controversial Spider-Man story of all time. This is the most hated Spider-Man story ever. This is a story that we as Spider-Man fans talk about 18 years later, that anything that reminds us of this story gets brought up. This is the focal point of the division in the Spider-Man fandom between the company that owns the character and us as the readers. I read this when it first came out in the floppies, and at the time, I lived in Napa, California. There was no comic book store in that city, and I didn't own a car to go to the nearest comic shop, which was like a 30-minute drive away. At the time, there was no bus, and so what I would do is to read comics was I would rent stuff or borrow stuff, if you will, from the library. And one of the things that they did have was new floppy issues of Amazing Spider-Man. And I remember realizing, I was like, oh wow, they have at least something of new comics. And this was during the Civil War era. And so I was reading Civil War Amazing Spider-Man as it was coming out, and I would go to the library like every 2 weeks or 1 week or whatever, return my books and my movies, and I would read Amazing Spider-Man. And so I remember reading these floppies when they came out. And back then, I didn't really think so much of it where to me, it didn't seem as like I didn't expect it to be a story we're talking about 18 years later. That it's still controversial to this day. That people will reference it almost in any given Spider-Man comic book conversation. I mean, now we're even having the conversations with the movies, right? Because things that happened in the last Spider-Man movies were based on some of the events that happened in this. And so this is how monumental this story is to people. I'm 3 minutes into the video and I haven't even cracked the book open. So I'm going to get started. So I bought this book from Waterfront Comics. They had a liquidation. Marvel had a liquidation sale, and he bought this. And so like it was originally like retail price, like $19.99, and he got them like for like 80% off, and then sold them for like 50% off or something. So I paid like $10. And so if you don't know the story, it starts up, Peter is trying to save Aunt May, and she's probably gonna die. She's gonna die. That's the story. And so Peter's doing everything in his power to stop his aunt from dying. And he and Iron Man don't get along, right? Everyone knows the story, I think. Everyone watching this knows the story, so I don't really need to explain it. But what I will say is what I was going into this while reading it was, people say this is the worst Spider-Man story ever. I wanted to try to read it from the stake of like, is it well written, and is the art good, and does it make me feel something as a reader? And oh boy, does it. J. Michael Straczynski is an incredible wordsmith. He is just so good with words that I just envy it. The way his dialogue, his storytelling, his inner monologue really just like sink home. He just hits it out of the park. And Joe Quesada's art is Joe Quesada's art. It's not bad. It's not great. It does the job, and it conveys a sequential story and has some cool bits like this where you're like, oh yeah, that's fun. I did really like these pages, these Doctor Strange pages. I thought they were fantastic. This is very Joe Quesada, this stuff, right? His Daredevil is like this a lot. And he did really knock it out of the park in these Doctor Strange issues. And the story, I read this in one sitting. And I've always been like I've always had the mindset, if I read a story in one sitting, it's really good. And I understand that's a controversial take, but from a story perspective, like, I feel like this story in itself goes, you can kind of like hand this over to someone who's never read Spider-Man. They just know, like, oh yeah, great power, great responsibility, things like that. Like, I feel like someone could read this story who just knows the basic of Spider-Man, and this story would move them. And that's not because they have years of history with the character or years, like, oh man, this story, yeah, this bit with the little girl and then the web designer and the businessman leading into the Mephisto moment, so well written. Like, J. Michael Straczynski is incredible. Like, I showed this, my fiance looked over when I was reading this scene. We're sitting in bed and I was reading this scene. And she goes, oh, that's creepy. And I was like, yeah, this is Mephisto. This is the devil of Marvel. And she's like, what are you reading? And I said, oh, this is that One More Day story. And she goes, oh, is that the one where Peter sells his soul? Right? Like, she's heard me talk about it. And so I said, I always thought that but I haven't read it since I was like 2007. So what was I? 20 something? I was 20 something. 22. I haven't read it since then, and I read her this scene where Mephisto is talking about souls don't really mean anything, but a soul in pain, in loss, and hopelessness, that's what really he wants. And I was like, ugh, so creepy. And then, like, just this whole scene was really good. And I posted on some Marvel groups online saying that I was reading this, and I seen one guy say, oh, the first 3 issues are really great, but the last one is just terrible. And I disagree. And I disagree. I think this was incredibly well written as well. There's a part in here that really, like, hit me, and it was this part in particular. Let me get it to focus. Right here where it says, the answer is yes, you monster. MJ, wait. How expected. And I know that people are very fond of the marriage in Spider-Man. I know, I get it. But this really just, like, I've mentioned in my other videos before that I haven't read the marriage years of Spider-Man. At least not enough to have such a fondness for it. And I'm at the part where MJ had turned down Peter's proposal, and she's like, maybe we can date, but I don't think we should get married. Like, she's saying that up front to him, and this really hit me because I'm like, it was almost like it was never meant to be. And she does have this great lines of dialogue here where she says she knows in her heart of hearts that what they've done, can never be undone. And as I was reading this, like I've said, I am not a big, I don't have the fondness of Peter and MJ being married, but as just a reader and a fan, and I just love this character so much, reading this really hit me in the gut. Like, it was really emotional. Like, I felt something. And I know this is, controversial to say, but One More Day is a good comic book. It is incredibly well written. And as I'm not a big fan of Joe Quesada, but he really did a great job too. These types of panels, this types of page work to this, like, it really made me feel something. Like this, these moments, even this like real humanistic moments, really made me feel something with his art. And like, I know it's a story too. Like, I don't know why the colors didn't make her hair red, but what are you gonna do? And like, it really just kind of hit me in the gut. And I'm not a big MJ fan. I'm not. This scene right here, awesome. Like with the ding, and you see the going down thing, right? And like the door's closing on her, and Peter's distracted by other women, like this chick, and he's just a brand new day. And I was just like, I was online looking up the Brand New Day omnibus, thinking I should probably buy this because I don't know when it's gonna be collected in Epic Collection. And I know it's controversial to say this, and I'm not trying to be controversial. I'm not trying to have hot takes on purpose. I'm really not. I'm not trying to be a contrarian, but this is a good comic. This was very well written, and the art is good. Coloring, MJ's hair could be redder, but man, it really hit me in the gut. It really made me feel something so much that I was like, I normally read Spider-Man every night. I was going to jump back into like 195, and I was like, I need a palate cleanser. So I just went to Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, Fantastic Four, that I'm reading very slowly. And I was like, all right, okay, this is fine. And then I went to bed. But man, this book, it's a good book. I'm sorry. So, so I'm not sorry, but yeah, I like this book, and definitely hit me in the feels, which I guess it's supposed to. So it did its job. We're still talking about it 18 years later. So those are my thoughts on One More Day. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys on the next one. Peace.